Dr. Paul Zak is a professor of economics, psychology, and management at Claremont Graduate University and is ranked in the top 0.3% of most cited scientists with over 170 published papers and more than 19,000 citations to his research. His 2 decades of research have taken him from the Pentagon to Fortune 50 boardrooms to the rainforest in New Guinea. Along the way, he has helped start a number of interdisciplinary fields, including neuroeconomics, neuromanagement, and neuromarketing. He has written 3 books and is a regular TED speaker. His newest book, Immersion, The Science of the Extraordinary and the Source of Happiness, was released last fall. He's also a 4-time tech entrepreneur. His current company, Immersion Neuroscience, is a software platform that allows anyone to measure what the brain loves in real time to improve outcomes in entertainment, education and training, advertising, and live events. We're honored to bring you Dr. Paul Zak speaking about the neuroscience of immersion, how it applies to donor engagement and fundraising. Take it away, Dr. Zak.
Thank you so much, Emily. Hi, everybody. So don't freak out. Little bit of science, lots of applications. So the reason to think about the neuroscience of fundraising is because, at least for me, I'm a super practical guy, right? I just want to understand how to most effectively communicate to individuals in a way that tells their brain, this is important and you might want to take an action. That's it. So I've been doing this for 20, 25 years. We have developed a lot of interesting technologies. So I'm going to do a little science and a lot of examples with data so you can see how to craft fundraising appeals in the most effective way. So that's our goal, and I'll have time for some questions at the end. So got a couple of slides for you. Give me a second to pull these up. New platform. We've worked a lot in my lab on fundraising because it's something that we can measure directly. So if I send you, say, an ad for, I don't know, Tesla cars, and I want to see if that ad's effective at influencing your behavior, it's very difficult to get people to buy Tesla cars. I can't pay you enough in an experiment to do that. So that makes it very difficult. But when we look at fundraising, if that appeal's effective, and generally people like money, want to keep money, if we can somehow measure whether what's going on in their brain leads to a donation to a charity, then we can identify how those particular pathways in the brain lead to behavior. And then by reverse engineering, go, okay, well, what kind of effective appeal led to that behavior? This is me. As Emily said, much more in my book. Lots of free stuff you can download at my website, getimmersion.com. Find me on X. So lots of resources if this is useful for you. So I'm very interested in social interactions. So in a very real and anatomical sense, we have social brains. We are interested and influence others by the way we act and engage with each other, or we can push them away. And so the interesting factor to me is, how might I be most effective at communicating to influence behavior? Again, there's no brainwashing. People have a big prefrontal cortex. Even if I communicate really effectively about how important this issue is, you can choose to support it or not support it, right? So all I want to know is how to most effectively communicate that information. And so when you look at ad agencies, like these famous ad dudes, they tiptoe around the outcome measures, the most interesting and creative advertising. And I say, I don't care. Because I'm a practical guy. All I want to do is move the needle, right? My job is to identify neurologically why some appeals work and some don't. I don't care if you think it's interesting or creative or because you like the work I'm doing. I don't care, right? I'm a super practical guy. I just want to move the needle. So all these niceties avoid the punchline, which is, does this appeal work or not? So here's the traditional approach. I'm going to play this for you.
Thank you all for coming to our focus group. Today, we're going to show you commercials from the Republican candidates. We'd like your honest opinions.
This punch is too sweet.
Your blouse makes you look fat.
Opinions about the ads.
I live in that place.
2008. Former Governor Vincent Aleppo said in the New York Times, "I will protect the nation from attack."
He's got my vote.
But in that same issue of the New York Times, they also printed an article about terrorist leader Nusaf al-Mustafi.
God, what have I done?
And ye shall judge them by the company they keep.
Oh my God, they're going steady. Did everyone see that?
So, what do we think?
Well, I thought every part of it was good, but overall I hated it.
I feel exactly the opposite, but the same. That was the best milkshake ad I've ever seen. Makes me want a milkshake.
Okay, so that latter-day philosopher Homer Simpson has identified the problem with asking people if they like something. If liking of a commercial or an appeal generated results, we would just do that. But liking is an unfair question. We really want to know, did this communication capture you sufficiently strongly emotionally so that you are compelled to take an action? That's asking about your unconscious emotional states that we have little or no insight into. So the liking the focus groups has failed and failed miserably.
Thank you.
Sorry. So let's try a different approach. Over many years, and I'll describe this to you, we identified a neurologic state I've called immersion that, by all accounts, captures the value that the brain assigns to a social emotional experience. So we first started doing this work commercially many years ago, taking it out of my academic laboratory and bringing it to corporate clients. You get this bad feeling, like if I'm really taking money from people, I don't mind taking grant money because grant money means something might work or not work. It funds basic research. But if we're doing applied problem solving, the work we're doing better work. So I thought, hey, let's measure Super Bowl commercials. This is data from the 2018 Super Bowl. And let's see if we can pick up the rankings of those commercials by tens of thousands of people. So USA Today for many, many years, at least 30 years, has asked people to rank from 1 to 10 commercials. Well, we should be able to pick that out. That's a crowdsourced ranking. What we found in 2018, and every year we've done this afterwards, is there is no relationship between the ranking of what commercials people like and what this neurologic state immersion says is most valuable to your brain. So let me give you an example of that with some data so you can see this. So let me play this ad, and then we'll see the data animated below it. We'll just talk about it.
Diet Coke Twisted Mango, because that's why. Can't help it. Hey, still going. Maybe slowing it down. Maybe it's getting sexier. I don't know. Mango does.
Okay, so that is a weird commercial. So again, it was rated 65th out of 80 commercials in the Super Bowl that year for likability. But my claim is it was the most neurologically valuable to your brain. It is a weird commercial, right? It's got the asymmetric filming. It's got that yellow wall, that weird giraffe woman with the rainbow socks. The whole thing is just odd. So Diet Coke sales had been flat for the last 2 years. In 2018, early 2018, when this came out, they had their first quarterly increase in sales. So we can't say for sure that was due to this commercial or other commercials. But when we look at this data, we find that it starts out very strong. There's a kind of a little quiescent phase, and then this peak when she says she starts moving differently. Hey, maybe it's getting sexier, maybe it's getting slower. So the key point here is that just because you like something doesn't mean it's going to move the needle, and just because it's unlikable doesn't mean it's not valuable to your brain. So we had to ask, which predicts outcomes better? the neurologic immersion measure or the likability measure. So because we do not have sales bumps associated with each of these ads, we can't do that direct comparison, although we've done that for other clients. But we do have a proxy for impact, which is YouTube views and YouTube comments. So we look at 1 month after the Super Bowl, and we looked at the relationship between immersion and those two measures of buzz, if you will. We find a positive relationship between neurologic immersion and a negative relationship between the liking measure from AdMeter and buzz. So whatever we're measuring, and I will explain that in a moment, it's going in the right direction, right? More immersion, I'm getting more buzz associated with this. More buzz, we presume, is going to result in more sales. So let's keep moving forward. So as I said earlier, most brain processes are unconscious. If we ask people about things like not only liking, but do you think this ad or this appeal is persuasive? Would you share this with other people? It does not predict outcomes. So we need some kind of technology to assess what the brain really values. And that evaluation mechanism took a long time to discover. So many taxpayer dollars funded by U.S. Department of Defense over many years we were tasked with identifying combination of signals in the brain that would accurately and consistently predict what people would do after a message or an experience. The DoD funded this to give soldiers a new superpower called persuasion. Can we use words rather than weapons to persuade people to cooperate with us? And so what we discovered in these many years of research is that there are two core components to immersion. The first is you've got to attend to this, right? So if your attention is kind of a zero conscious attention, it's a 0-1 variable. Either I'm attending here, attending somewhere else. I can't do both things, right? So the first thing is I've got to get your attention, but it turns out that attention just opens the door. It's a sufficient condition to get you to move, but it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. So drugs like Ritalin, they're used for ADD, or Adderall, increase attentional responses by increasing dopamine binding to the brain's prefrontal cortex. So I always say attention is a false god, right? Because we put something online, we can count clicks, views, but attention doesn't mean you can get me to care about it. So the next component of immersion is you've got to make this appeal emotionally resonant. That emotional resonance is associated with the action of another neurochemical called oxytocin that captures the emotional response that communication induces inside me. So oxytocin and dopamine have this very interesting dance they go through in which they reinforce each other. So if I can get you to pay attention to what I'm doing, and pay is the right word, it's a metabolic cost, and this communication, this experience has sufficient emotional resonance, then I have an immersive experience, either low immersion, medium immersion, high immersion. So it's a continuous variable that I can measure directly from the brain. So why is this important? It's important because if something is identified in the brain as valuable, it's saved in the brain in a very particular way. So if you think of your own lives, the birth of a child, a wedding, a car accident, it could be good or bad, but if that's high emotional value, it's much more easily recalled than, I don't know, what you had for breakfast a week ago, which is not that important. So I describe this as like a soccer ball. This new information is like a soccer ball that's being put in your brain, and your brain's all wet and smushy. And if I want to pull that soccer ball out, that piece of information, if it doesn't have any emotional tagging, then it's really hard to grip it. But emotions are like grippy handles on that soccer ball, right? I have little ways to pull this out because of those emotional tags that say this is important. So from your perspective, you need to be able to create communications so that there are enough emotional tags that when it comes to making a donation decision, that individual can easily pull out the information that you shared with him or her yesterday, last week, a year ago, when you follow up and say, hello, Mr. Smith or Mrs. Smith, remember you expressed an interest in supporting this campaign we have going, and now I'd like you to, make a commitment on how much you can help us. And we discuss this and that, and you've got to have that information be able to be recalled, right? So again, often, certainly for major donors, those decisions occur over time, and then emotional tagging is essential so that the individual understands the importance of this issue. Okay, so we measure these changes in neurochemicals and the electrical activity they induce many, many different ways. I've done about 10,000 blood draws in the last 20 years to measure changes in neurochemicals, high density neurophysiology. And then in the last 6 or 7 years, we are now able to pull this data from smartwatches and fitness wearables. It turns out, big surprise, that your brain is embodied. So we carefully mapped out the pathways from the brain to the peripheral nervous system. And by doing that, we can actually use standard wearables, we don't care which one, apply algorithms to infer brain activity from the brain's output file, the cranial nerves, second by second. So these data are easily collected. And in my book, Immersion, I draw lessons from over 50,000 brain observations, and many of those were collected using smartwatches because you can do studies in which people are consuming information the ways that people really do, which is when it's noisy, at home, with the TV on, with the dog barking. And so these studies are so-called ecologically valid. They're not restricted to a sterile laboratory. So I want to ensure that when I start showing you some examples, those examples are from real people doing real things, making real decisions with real money, not imaginary things. So there's an algorithm that these 50,000 brain observations have led me to that you can apply when you create your own communications. So I can't remember anything, so I always make acronyms. The acronym for this one is SARTA, S-A-R-T-A. It's kind of like certain. After I made this algorithm, I discovered there's a little village in the Alps in Italy called Certa. So at some point I have to go there and make a pilgrimage and buy a t-shirt from them. But for now, you can think of Certa, like certain, as the 5 steps that will improve your communication and motivate people to take an action. So let me go through each of these in just a little bit of detail, and then I'll give you a bunch of examples on how we can use this information for actual ads. So first is staging. This is really ensuring that the person or people you are speaking to are ready to absorb the information that you have. They've got to be comfortable. So I call this psychological safety. I developed a way to measure that from smartwatch data as well. And so if we always want to be efficient, but efficiency works against having enough neural bandwidth so I can actually be immersed and process the information you want to tell me. So we tend to do this quite naturally, right? Make people comfortable, offer them a beverage or a snack. And so think about building time in to that communication period so that you can have that person be comfortable, be relaxed. They're not worried about something else. They're not hungry or tired or their feet hurt. All that takes away bandwidth in the brain from processing the information you want to share with them. The second is I want to create a high immersion experience. The data show that you've got about 15 seconds to capture people's attention. If you cannot get them to attend to what you are talking about or showing within 15 seconds, it's very difficult to get them to come back to attention after that. Once you capture their attention, you've got to create an emotionally compelling communication. And we have found that the most effective way to sustain neurologic immersion is to use a narrative arc, right? So storytelling is the most effective way to communicate and influence human behavior. What does that mean? It means introducing characters at human scale, not, there are a million children starving in Africa, but here is one child whose name is Muhammad, and he lives in Zambia in a tiny village, right? Very human scale. and he's been supported by our charity, and he used to be starving, and now new picture, here he is in a school uniform going to school smiling, right? And so there are many other children like Muhammad that you can support. Okay, so human scale story, putting characters in a situation and then having that situation have a conflict or crisis, right? So that social interaction, how human beings resolve crises, are fascinating to us as social creatures, right? That's the basis for all movies and novels and most good stories you tell, at happy hour. They're about some weird event that you or somebody you know got into and got out of. Right? So as social creatures, we are fascinated by what the other humans are doing. We've got to communicate this in a way that has enough authentic emotional responses that resonates in the listener. Okay, and then have a call to action. As Tammy said earlier, you've got to be brave about asking for the gift, right? So once you've got them captured emotionally, they now care about what you're talking about, at least temporarily. And so the key then is to have that call to action, if possible, at an immersion peak, which relieves the emotional tension of your story. Next is relevance. So the term of art in neuroscience for this is called top-down control. When something is relevant to me or you, the top part of the brain, the cortex, directs the lower parts of the brain that process emotion to put in more processing power, if you will. It says, hey, this is important to you. So I have an Apple logo here. I'm a longtime Apple guy. When I get an announcement from Apple, I pay attention. I'm deep in the Apple ecosystem, and that affects, my daily life, just about every second of my daily life, between the phone, the computer, cloud storage, music, whatever else I'm doing. So if you shoot me information about Microsoft, don't care, we'll delete it. It's not relevant to me. Don't like the Microsoft. Sorry for Microsoft people. Again, another example is diapers. So my children are older. If you show me a cute commercial with little infants and big eyes and talk about Huggies, I'll be amused for 30 seconds, but then have no effect on me. It's not relevant to me. So the point here is that there's not one best narrative for every audience. There are narratives that are focused and relevant to particular audiences. And you can use that information, or you can tie in that relevance by using iconography, music, physical location, something that draws on cultural references or memories of similar experiences that target will have or have had. So that's important because we want to have consistent messaging, right? So I want to make this relevant to you. I want to make sure you know it's relevant so your brain will process information as well as possible, but also make it seem familiar and comfortable and easy to understand. So target the narrative for a particular person or audience. The T in CERTA is for target. Oftentimes, what we've seen with neurologic data is that an appeal, an ad, a commercial, a movie may be just okay in terms of immersion, might be so-so for a large population, but for almost every so-so or even poor communication, there are super fans. So if you can find these super fans, they will not only act on what you're doing, they will work on your behalf for free. They will spread the information far and wide because it's so important to them. So these people are your activators. You want to not only have them help you, but give them tasks to do. This experience is so important to them that they want to tell others about it. So ask them to do that. Ask them for help. You will make them happy by doing that, and they will help you. So a great example is this movie, Fault in Our Stars, that came out, 10 years ago, 8 years ago. It's based on a young adult novel, love story for teenagers, focused on young teenage girls. This movie cost $12 million to produce. There was unknown key stars in it, and it made over $300 million worldwide by activating the key target demographic, which is teenage girls who went in groups and of girls, and often brought some boys who wanted to be with those girls with them, and saw that movie 4, 5, 6, 7 times. right? They ran competitions to see when which state would post the most about the movie on social media, and they fly the stars in to meet fans in that state. They had after the movie had been out about 5 weeks, they had this special pay an extra $10 for a ticket, and then the stars would video conference into your theater once the movie was over and answer questions. I mean, brilliant activation of the core target demographic that generated enormous amounts of free word of mouth social media posts that drove this to be a huge monster hit. And lastly, as I said earlier, call to action. So you've got to have this peak immersion moment when, the peak immersion moment is the best time to request someone to take an action. So that's a picture of me. First time I went tandem skydiving, jumping out of an airplane at 12,000 feet. I'm having a peak immersion moment. If you've ever been skydiving or zip lining or something, after you get done, they say, hey, you should sign up for our annual program where you can go skydiving or zip lining, as much as you want over the next year for the low, low price of $200,000 or whatever. Right? So you are so activated. You've had such a peak experience that indeed you are excited about repeating it. So once you've captured people emotionally at this immersion peak, it's the best time to make that ask. Okay, so here's our summary. The formula for CERTA is staging, immersion, tell a narrative story with a narrative arc, make it relevant, identify your superfans, target them, and then have the call to action. And this produces an extraordinarily powerful impact on your target. Okay, let me give you some examples. This measure of immersion is extraordinarily accurate because we have convolved multiple measures of brain activity into a single overall impact, precisely designed to capture the behaviors that people have, not liking, not intentions, not feelings, but it is designed to predict outcomes. You can see some of the accuracy there. These are in the 80s and 90s. We're now consistently hitting 95, 98, 99% accuracy at predicting outcomes, not just for the people that we're measuring, but in fact, market outcomes. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of that. And then, so I'll run for about 10 more minutes and I'll have time for questions, you guys. So one question that people have asked, is, do I have to make you cry to make you donate? And the short answer is no. We looked at happy, sad, foreign, domestic. And in fact, as I said, we traced out the pathways that make up immersion. We do that by using drug infusion. So we use pharmaceuticals to turn on or turn off different pathways in the brain. In this study, we looked at public service ads from outside the US, so that US participants in a study had not seen them before, all in English, and some weird. So let's just do this. So this, what we found in this paper is that if we infuse synthetic oxytocin versus placebo, when people watch these ads, they donate to 50% more of the charities that were featured, and they donate 56% more money. They say they care about the characters in the ad more. So everything is ramped up by increasing that emotional resonance. So let me play this ad from Finland, and then we'll just talk about it.
Don't be every other. Test your heart at everyother.fi.
Okay, so after that ad was played, people had the option. They earned, I think, $5 for watching each ad. And after they earned that, they said, hey, do you want to donate some money to the American Heart Association? So a lot of people did, and people who were given synthetic oxytocin donated more than those who were given a placebo. So let's break down that ad. First of all, it's horrific. I know some of you are laughing. You are bad, bad people. Don't laugh. Right? So if you took this at face value, you would say, we just watched 2 people die. That's horrendous. But again, we're using a narrative art. We're setting up characters. We're putting them in this odd situation. They don't have restraints. They realize it. They don't know what to do. And yet they fly off this amusement park ride. It's those young guys, doofuses on the bottom who signal to the audience, hey, this is just pretend. This is not true, right? If it was true, it would be horrific and people would be screaming. It's just a funny way to remind you, people in Finland, to, I don't know, not eat so much meat or something and don't get heart disease. So again, we recognize that this is a fictional story that has an element of truth in it, and it's told in a compelling way. And that, in fact, has high immersion. So that's an example of a very targeted result in which the outcome that we looked at, donating to the American Heart Association, was distant from the story, but related to it. And that people donated to the American Heart Association at all after watching this is really amazing. And some of the people on placebo donated too, right? So it's a compelling mini narrative, mini story about the ubiquity and danger of heart disease. Okay, so let me show you one with some data. I'm going to show you data second by second for immersion for this one. And I'm actually going to break down overall immersion, the emotional component, and the attentional component, so you can see those. This is for travelers insurance. So the problem with life insurance is that it's a poorly differentiated product. Right? Whether you're life insurance with Travelers, with State Farm, with Prudential, it's all pretty much the same. Prices are pretty much the same. And having looked at many life insurance commercials, they never talk about death. They just talk about opportunities, right? It's really death insurance they're selling you, right? So that, anyway, let's look at this one, and then we'll break it down at the end.
You're gonna grow up.
This small house made of brick and stone, built on laughter, our dreams and hope. In this small house, together we have grown, made a family, made us all a home. This small house with our hidden memories.
You make it a home, we help you protect it. Travelers, it's better under the umbrella.
Okay, I'm sure a couple of you guys teared up watching this. I've seen it, over 100 times. Still makes me tear up. It's a beautiful ad. So for the data, the red is the overall immersion. The blue is the attentional response, that kind of 0-1 response, I mean, they're attending or not. And the green is the emotional component. So the emotional component tracks the overall immersion very carefully. So what do we see in this ad? We see it starts out, we have kind of a startled response. Oh, something's happening. So we have this high immersion moment. And then we see the pattern, which is girl gets hurt, dad wipes away the tear. Girl gets hurt, dad wipes away the tear. Once the brain sees that pattern, it doesn't need to spend as much processing power on it. And so then there's a pattern break right in here, where now the girl's going away to college. She's really crying. There's a close-up of her face. And then in here is this beautiful cut from dad saying goodbye to daughter going to college to dad giving away the bride at her wedding. And then the girl wipes away dad's tear. Right, so just beautifully crafted. The house, the trees get bigger, the house gets older, the people get older. We get the notion, right? So if you have a family, particularly a young family, and God forbid something should happen to you, you still want your daughter to live in the house you grew up in. You still want her to have a nice wedding, and you just might want to think about life insurance and maybe call Travelers. So this ad is really, really well done. When Travelers used our software to measure the impact of half a dozen new ads they're releasing, their outcome measure was YouTube views. not a perfectly clean measure, but a measure nonetheless. And the relationship between immersion in those commercials and YouTube views, I think this was 3 months after release, was nearly a perfect correlation, 0.86 correlation. In other words, the higher the immersion, the more people that watch the ads, almost perfectly. And so this tells us how effective well-crafted narratives are. And then lastly, here's the branding moment, and this happens at an immersion peak. So it's a really, really well-designed ad. And again, at least from their metric of YouTube views, was very successful. So let me show you another one. This one is by the ad agency BBDO for Guinness Beer. Let me just play it, and then we'll talk about it. So it's older, so the animation's not quite as pretty. Okay, so there's good and bad here, right? The good is the simplicity of the story, right? You have a black and white photo that you're panning in on, very Ken Burns kind of approach. And then you have below each of the twins, word, 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 and then a break. Remember, the brain loves that break in pattern. That's when we start seeing this increase in immersion. And then what happens? This is a hero's journey story, right? Where one twin gives up her place at the Olympics for the other twin. And so we have the swelling of the music, the increase in immersion. By the way, the music matters. Getting the right music is also testable and important. So this big peak of immersion, and then nothing much happens. And then you have this weird just dropping in the Guinness logo and slogan. So what this communication lacks is what I call product story congruence. There's no relationship between the story and the action they want you to take, in this case, buying Guinness, right? So you can tell a great story, and actually this did moderately well in market. For BBDO, actually, we have sales data, direct sales data from them. So this did actually okay in market, and it was an okay average immersion story. Not as good as the best ones that BBDO has produced for Guinness, and not as bad as the worst ones. But if I show this to a group of marketers, they'll just laugh, like, seriously? But I can imagine the pitch that BBDO made to the Guinness people. So 80% of Guinness drinkers are male. They're like, oh, what do guys like? They like sports and women. Oh, this ad's going to kill. It's going to be great. No, again, it lacks that product story congruence. So again, I think it's poor understanding of the way the brain connects an emotional story to an action. So they're trying to get that holdover from this hero's journey story into a kind of halo effect on Guinness Beer, but it does that not imperfectly, but not as well as some beautiful ads that BBDO has produced for Guinness, where the ad is integral to the story. Okay, just a couple more. You guys remember in California and many other states, under Obamacare, states set up health insurance exchanges for people to get health insurance when they hadn't had it before. In California, the first year that was released, a little over 1 million people got new health insurance. Yay, that's great. And every subsequent year, there was no increase in the number of people who got health insurance. It was just static. Some people dropped it, some people got it, but it was 1 million people. So the state of California hired a well-known ad agency and spent $100 million taxpayer dollars for this ad agency to produce and air ads to promote people getting health insurance. So let me play this ad with data, and then we can break it down.
When you don't want things to break down, you take care of them. That's why free preventive care comes with all health insurance plans offered through Covered California. Enroll by January 31st to avoid the IRS tax penalty. Covered California offers quality health plans, and you can choose from brand name insurance companies you know. We help you compare apples to apples. To find free, local, in-person help, visit coveredca.com.
Okay, so by now you guys can diagnose this yourself, right? There's very weak characters. It's not an interesting setting. There are no faces. There's no emotion. It's very functional, right? So just awful. These two ran back to back. They ran both the voiceover in English or Spanish. So to save money, they did the same commercials in English or Spanish, and we measured people in their preferred language. I'll break it down by language in a second. But we can see from the data is it starts out okay and then it really quickly drops off. Because we have second by second data, we can then look at subparts of these ads and ask about them. So this 15-second drop is when it said, sign up now to avoid the IRS penalty. Nobody cares. Low immersion. Why? Everybody knows by law, if you're sick and you go to an emergency room, you have to be treated whether you can pay or not. So that threat is not valuable. What's this little peak here? Free help. Oh, free's good. Help's good. Yeah. So again, for lack of testing, $100 million was basically wasted by not testing this before it was released. Moreover, when we compare immersion across ads for people who heard the same ad in English or Spanish, first of all, you see these two lines are highly correlated, so brains work similarly. Not perfectly correlated, but very similar. But it lacked that relevance for Spanish speakers. These ads were very generic. They showed people of multiple races in generic settings, and they didn't speak to the particular Spanish-speaking audience in California. So to, quote, save money by doing voiceover with two different ads, they not only diminish impact on both demographics, but radically in Spanish speakers who in California tend to have lower income than English speakers and are eligible for free or subsidized health care. They're the ones who typically don't have health insurance and the ones you want to target the most. Complete fail on that basis. We have found also that when you add social purpose into your appeal, something that you guys always do, we've done work looking at Kiva ads with or without social purpose. So individual purpose would be, I want an investment to increase my fruit stand so my family can have a better life. But a social purpose would be, I want to have an investment to increase my fruit stand to employ young women in my village so they don't have to get married so young. So that's social purpose. We see almost 100% more donations when there's social purpose in these ads. These are written ads that we took from Kiva and just modified slightly to have, again, individual social purpose. This is published research you can find online. So what we've done is create a tool, which I call distributed neuroscience, using smartwatches that people already own to objectively capture people's emotional responses to communications and experiences that measure very accurately predicts outcomes, YouTube views, social shares, information recall, donations, etc. The platform identifies superfans, where you're the evangelist for your cause. And in these communications that have low points, I call that neurologic frustration. This is like the California Health Insurance Exchange ad that had a frustration point when you threaten people with an IRS penalty. So all these are ways to apply the CERTA algorithm in a very effective way. So you can use our currently iOS-only version of the software for free. If you're an Apple person, we're working on Android now. Click that with your phone. You can download it. It also measures whether you're getting enough social emotional interaction to stay emotionally healthy. And that gives you a chance to measure, at least for free, the kind of ads on yourself, at least at a minimum, the kind of ads you're developing or communications you're developing. So great tool that you guys can use, at least the basic version, without any cost. So with that, I would love to take some questions and but if we have comments in the chat, we have about 10 minutes or so to ask me questions.
Thanks, Paul. If you can see me now, I hopped in just to get a couple of questions your way to make it a little easier so you don't have to surf through the chat. We had a question about basically how does this science apply to communications that are not commercial ads, such as an email?
A great question. So same thing in the email. I think the certain algorithm applies to all communications. So again, human scale story, make it relevant to the target, have a narrative arc. You might even ask them in terms of readiness, hey, this is going to be important. Can you take 3 deep breaths before you read this? Have that call to action. What we have found is that the more senses you can engage, the more effective that communication. So as I'm sure all of you know, email, text is much less effective than audio, which is less effective than video. So, video hits the brain with a lot more information. The human brain, 25% of the human brain is devoted to processing visual input. So, if you look at, text on X, the former Twitter, versus video, you get way more impact. So I think email may almost be dead. So I would say video when you can. Even audio is nice. It's unusual to get an audio email, but you can do that. They can hear your voice. They can hear why you're passionate about it. So it's a really effective way to capture the emotional component of the appeal that you're making.
Thank you. And by the way, thank you for the talk you gave. I jumped right into a question there because I want to maximize everyone's time that's here. But really, this has been phenomenal, Paul. Let me read another one to you. This one's from Krista. How does this apply to videos targeted to existing / soft prospects, such as at a fundraising dinner versus TV?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, part of that is making, for soft prospects, making the issue known to them in a way that's not a super hard sell. Like, here's something we thought you would be interested in, right? And then again, if you can do that in a way that has sufficient immersion, you planted those seeds, what I call grippy handles, so that when you do a follow-up and, then it'll be more effective. So I'm a big believer in using all the technology possible. So if you're doing this electronically, track how many people open that email, track how many people go to your website, right? All that are signals that they are investing time and energy into understanding what you're sending them. So you can begin to kind of have a funnel and identify the most likely prospects to respond. So you may not want to have a call to action. It might just be a informational video. So here's an issue that we're very concerned about, and we thought you would care about too. Well, that's interesting. If you know enough about that person, again, you're going to miss the mark for some people. But yeah, it may be that the second or third interaction is when you want to make a call to action, not necessarily on the first one.
Okay, great. Thank you. By the way, everyone, I see there's chat happening. If you have a specific question, you're welcome to drop it in the Q&A box. I'm also surfing through the chat as best I can, but we have a quick question here. There were some thank yous to you, Paul, about the tool, the resource that you shared. And this was a question about when will the Android version be available?
That'll be available in March. There is an Android version now, but it's not free. So we have another commercial application, but you can ping me. I'd like this question from Vicky, if I can answer that.
Of course.
Which emotional triggers? So, there are about 60 cardinal emotions, and they're all not distinct from each other. So it's not happy or sad. I have to use one bad word, you guys. Plug your ears if you're sensitive. I have to get you to give a shit about what I'm communicating. And that's what Immersion captures. Like, holy crap, people in Finland are dying from heart disease. 50% of them have heart disease. That's huge news. I should do something about it. Adjust my diet, donate to the charity, whatever that is. So I've got to get you to care about it, right? And that means that's why I call it emotional resonance. I don't care about which emotion it is because none of those are distinct. I care about, can I capture physiologically that you really give a crap about this thing that I'm communicating to you about. If I can, then your brain goes, oh, this is important. I just heard an important thing. Again, so think of sort of three ways to do that. One is the readiness I talked about. One is the content. We talked about that structure. The third is delivery, right? So if I were to speak in a monotone, you just go to sleep. So also the way you deliver that, if it's in person, if it's in video or audio, push your passion into it. Immersion is contagious. If I'm excited about this, and I am, at least some of you guys are picking that up, and you're like, "Oh, holy crap, this is pretty cool!" Like, all right, now I got a system, I got an algorithm that I can go through and ask, does it fit those 5 parts, or how effectively can I lean into those 5 parts? Yeah, that's a cool question.
I love that. By the way, I know you're obviously watching chat there too, Paul, but you're getting a lot of thank yous and super interesting. And thanks for sharing your research. Great session. Let me ask you a detailed question. You might be seeing it as well from Andy. Instead of a pause in the video, does extra space between paragraphs in a certain place in an email offer the same benefit?
That's a good question. Emails are tough to measure neurologically because people read them at different rates and they don't hit the brain with as much bandwidth. So written communications, we have much less information on. It's hard to get people, even if I do a study where I have the words come across the screen at the same rate, so I force you to read the same rate, even that's actually hard to get enough signal. But I would say, mix it up. Again, think of the Guinness ad I showed, or the Travelers ad, pattern, break and pattern. So maybe it's an emoji, maybe it's right. So if it's paragraphs, then make a change, insert a picture, whatever that is, so that you have a break in that. So again, the brain's a super lazy organ. It just wants to be at baseline and idle. So if you break a pattern, it goes, oh, holy crap, the pattern broke. What's going on here? So anyway, pattern breaks are great.
Great, that's fascinating and also very relevant to today, how we read through emails. So great question, Andy. Vicki has a question. Curious if you've done research on planned legacy giving. If so, would you please share insight? And she thanks you for your awesome presentation.
I've done zero work on that, so I'm not going to even try to lean into it. Great question. I don't have an answer.
All right. Well, thank you for your candor there, Paul. Gosh, anyone else with any, let me hop over to Q&A. One thing as I'm looking here, I was going to ask you, Paul, it sounds like CERTA can almost be a litmus test. Let's make sure that any ideas, any campaigns, any thinking we do, we can just use that as like okay, last call, let's go through the CERTA and make sure we've hit all these points, because I really like how you formulate things.
Yeah, start in the beginning. I've been in, again, most of my work's on the corporate side, but I've been in so many meetings where the ad agency developing some ad, they'd have storyboards and hey, we have 4 options for you, and we think option 3 is the best one. And the client will go, oh, I really like option 2. I think we should do that. And they're like, well, option 2 we don't think is as good because this and that. I go, no, I'm writing the check, so I want to do option 2. And you're like, so we're back to the liking thing. Like I just like it. Again, I don't care. I'm practical. I just need to move the needle. So I think if you start out with CERTA, not the end, but the very beginning, right? So are we going to show this some time in which people have space to process information? So if you can corral those people in a space and make it comfortable, get them a cup of coffee, get comfy chairs, much better, right? As opposed to I'm emailing you, which works, at scale, but again, you're kind of busy, you're plowing through it. The storytelling part, I think of all those is the most important, really telling that human scale story. Again, all you guys know that already, but structure that wavy pattern that I showed you. It's always kind of a sine wave so that the call to action, the branding moment happens at an immersion peak, which isn't always at the end. It's very hard to do that at the end because you want to close the narrative arc. So I'm just not going to mention the name because I probably am NDA'd, but other life insurance companies have used our technology and they'll have at an immersion peak a car with a logo or a person with a shirt with a logo or a hat. So all that is being processed by the brain unconsciously that says emotional situation, company, emotional situation, company. So for you guys, you want the same thing. Emotional situation, branding for your organization, right? You want to have as many of those kind of settled branding components as possible. The brain's picking all that up. So kind of the more the better.
Amazing. Thank you. By the way, we had a quick refresher question from Ty about what was CERTA again. And Brianna, thank you for spelling out the acronym there. A little plug for the awesome podcast episode you did, Paul, with Tammy. For anyone that wants to hear more, check out that podcast episode. I really loved it, listened to it, and I found myself rewinding to hear you go through the CERTA acronym a bunch. Okay, it looks like we maybe have time for one more question here. I've got something from Paulette. You said we should engage as many senses as possible. Does this work in written word alone, meaning use descriptive language that engages the senses?
Oh, great question, Paulette. We haven't tested that, but other research that I've seen published suggests that we simulate that smell if it's written in our brains. We simulate that music, that sound. So I think that's a wonderful question and perfect place to end. So the more descriptive, the more sensorial, the more kind of hooks I have, the better. So wonderful idea, Paulette. I had never thought of that before. So you get an A+ today for your question.
Means a lot coming from you, Paul. Okay, well, listen, before we send you, Paul, back out to the lobby, we do want to announce the winners of the drawing for your latest book, Immersion. But again, thank you for your brilliance and for all you did to teach us today and for joining the Transform 24 conference. So again, everyone giving you a tangible view here. This is Dr. Zach, his book here, and we're going to announce the winners. We've got 3 copies of this that we're giving away. So without further ado, our first winner is Charmina Ellis. Charmina is from Edge for Tomorrow. Second winner, I feel like I should say, drum roll or something. We have Nancy Wolanski. Nancy Wolanski from the United Way in Rhode Island is a winner of Immersion. And the third copy is going to go to Tim Sherman of Kids Soar. So we will make sure to get everyone's information that has won a copy of your book. We'll make sure to get your preferred mailing address so that you can get that. So again, this completes our session on the neuroscience of immersion with Dr. Paul Zak. Everyone can head on back to the lobby and prepare to join Nathan Chappelle and Brian Crimmins for their session about the generosity crisis when it opens up at 1:25 p.m. Eastern. Give a little time, 1:25 p.m. Eastern is when the next session starts. And don't forget to join our wellness break session. If you were there before we did the fun photos, you can learn about exercises to improve memory and concentration. Don't forget about it, pun intended. And you'll be there with best-selling author and brain coach, Jim Quick. So I gotta get over there myself. So thank you again, Paul. You've been amazing.